I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Jeff Ament, the music composer for the FX limited series Under the Banner of Heaven. First thing I wanted to ask is, how familiar were you with this story or the fundamentalist LDS Church in general before signing on?
Hey Charlie, I was super familiar with the book. I think I started reading John Krakauer through Outside Magazine like years ago. Like they would, whatever his new Into Thin Air or whatever the new book, they would always publish an excerpt. And so pretty early on, I was a fan of John's, and I remember being really excited about this book because I have my own sort of unraveling of Catholicism, and I was really excited that he was doing. I knew the Elizabeth Smart story, and so I was excited that he was involved with it because I knew he was going to go deep, and it's one of my favorite of his books just because of the religious aspect of it.
So, one of the most prevalent themes in this series, I was saying this to you earlier, was this overwhelming sense of dread that you can feel about so much, even though the worst thing happens right in the beginning of it, but there's still that atmosphere that hangs over it. What music choices did you and your fellow composers make to communicate that sort of sense?
Well, there was a lot of talk early on with Lance about he wanted to have that shimmer of the celestial, but he wanted that to be juxtaposed with like just really dense earthly evil. And early on, we started talking about what instruments we would be using to sort of exaggerate those scenes. And we got a lot of that earthly stuff through the loopers that we were playing, and just running keyboards through lots of effects pedals and just getting really like sub harmonizer, low kind of guttural sounds through those loopers. And yeah, we would just sort of tune the room for, initially we hadn't seen a full episode, and so we were sort of creating sounds mostly based on the book and the screenplay at that point, and what Lance sort of felt like. He said it's going to be dark, and we're not going to shy away from the murder scene, and so you could sort of imagine the tension that you're going to have to bring to some of this stuff. And so he was just so great in that he would often say you can even go darker or heavier, and for some reason it's always been easier for me to get darker.
One other thing that I think is sometimes I can see that certain composers they have a score can be kind of easy to compose, but there are certain sections that can be challenging to find the right tone for. Were there any sections that proved that kind of challenging for you?
Yeah, I can think of three right off the bat, three sort of bigger scenes where often maybe you just sort of miss what they were going for in that scene. Like sometimes we would maybe get dark, and we would maybe make the scene feel a little bit too ominous or too evil, and maybe Lance was wanting it to be more hopeful or more of a neutral, melancholy vibe. And so there were a handful of things that we had to change over the process. And it took us, there was even a couple of scenes that it took us a couple of tries to sort of get the vibe right. But it's, initially he was just kind of giving us free rein to sort of like, bring whatever we needed to bring to the scene. And there were, like I said, there was a handful of times where we missed it and had to have another go at it. So.
And you're also, in addition to you, Josh Klinghoffer and John Wicks are also credited as composers. And I'm wondering, what was the collaborative process like of scoring a project when it was you and two other people?
Uh, well, initially, like the first 10 days that we spent composing, we would tune the room with like these looper stations, and that was Josh Klinghoffer and I and Josh Evans who recorded it and was the music editor. And then often it would just be Josh and I sort of improvising over these sort of ambient scapes that we'd create. And that first 10 days sort of probably gave us a good solid half of what ended up in the show. And the rest of it was usually either Josh Klinghoffer and Josh Evans and I sort of cutting to the scenes, or it would be, there's a handful of times that John Wicks would come in and we'd be like, hey, we put like this kind of dirgy drum over it, but it needs to be more of a, like a car chase. And so we would sort of have the thing mapped out instrumentally, and we would just sort of give him direction in terms of like when it needed to speed up and go double time, and when it needed to, lay off of all the drums and it's more percussion. And we're sort of like, I mean, none of us are, we've all been in music for 30, 40 years, but we were all sort of rookies to the scoring aspect of it. And I think Lance loved that part of it, because he kept saying like, don't listen to other scores, like do your own thing. We want this to be a new fresh approach to the music. And so we sort of ran with that. We sort of, that gave us a lot of confidence going into it, and that we kind of had a blank canvas, and we could sort of like come up with our own sound. And reading the book and reading the screenplay, I just felt like I knew the people. I felt like I knew all those characters. I mean, it was the early 80s. That was sort of when I was leaving Big Sandy. I was very familiar with, what was going on in the Catholic Church at that time. I was in a small town in Montana, which isn't that far removed from, a suburb of Salt Lake City. And so, we sort of went into that like with a lot of confidence, and a lot of it came from just Lance giving us that confidence.
So, oftentimes, I'm curious if you found yourself leaning into certain instruments in order to convey specific tones or themes for specific characters.
Yeah, we did start to, once we because we got episodes one by one, and once we got like the third episode, we started seeing how these montages were made up of these similar scenes. And so at that point we decided that we wanted, like, when Pyrie's sort of in that room, when he goes kind of inside of his own mind, and the room sort of turns around him, it's like looks like the inside of like a Mormon church or something. But there's a handful of those kinds of scenes where we by the third episode we were like, okay, we need to, in these montages that are going back and forth between these historical times, we need to give people just sonic reassurance, or sonic just a sound, or make the room sound a certain way to let them know that they're going back in time, or they're in the Pyrie's mind, or they're, in these different places. And that was the fun part of the puzzle, was mapping all that stuff out and going like, oh, let's, we can go back to that particular ambient piece that we used when they show historical scene when they're going back to, a Joseph Smith scene or Brigham Young. There's an Emma sound. Like we there was a horn sound like when Emma and Joseph Smith were young, and we would kind of revisit that. We'd bring those horns in those places. So those parts of the puzzle were really super, super fun as we were getting episodes, because we knew we had a little bit of a toolkit of performances and sounds that we could go into.
So one of the things I was curious about is, you are a member of the band Pearl Jam, and in 2017, Pearl Jam got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I was curious, what was that experience like?
In retrospect, it was so amazing because the months leading up to it, we were actually trying to make a record. And so we were a little bit frustrated by the fact that we were going to have to break up this creative process we were in to go back and do something that we felt was sort of like nostalgic. But once we were there, we decided that we were going to fly out our whole crew, and we were going to fly out all of our family and the people that were really close to us, and just try to make the event a big thank you to everybody. And that, looking back in that event, that was the best part, was just having all your people there that helped get you there. and then just to say thank you, and then to have a drink with them afterwards and reiterate those feelings. And because I think, like making a movie, it's like the stars and the director get, are the faces of the thing or whatever, but like there's so many people that it takes to make the thing great. And that's totally true of our band. Like there's, we have people that have worked with us from the very beginning. My tech, George Webb, who, handles the warehouse that has all of our gear and whatever, he's been with us every single step of the way and helped us sound great. And so it's great to have moments, over the course of a long career where you are forced to sit down and thank everybody. So that's what that was for me, for sure.
I'm also curious, is it weird to be at an event that's honoring you, but then you have to perform at that event?
We had been to a couple before, and I think that helped us a lot. And I think whenever you're, if you're a fan, like we were there when Neil Young got inducted, and we were there when Iggy Pop got inducted. So when I think it was a little bit easier for us to sort of like understand the format, and it really just does end up being just like this celebration of making it this far. And again, just all the people that helped get you there, and the fact that they're all in the room, and that it just become, and that's sort of like why we pick the songs that we picked. We try to pick more celebratory songs. So yeah, it's weird.
Well, Jeff, thanks you so much for joining us today. We wish you all the best over this Emmy season. And to all of our viewers, please like this video, subscribe, and don't forget to go to goldderby.com to make your Emmy predictions. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Charlie.